Are you ready? We are on. We are on. It's there. Might be this one. Already should be not mine.
You Rick Signals.
It reflected.
Is it Rick? Say on the bottom.
Or could be Mr. Listman's. I'll put it in the community lost in front. Okay. So we are going to start with our walkthrough of 129. I've told the committee, my plan is it one? Yeah, I think it's page 137. I plan to merge these two. They are compatible and for DFR, but I thought we would walk through this.
Sorry.
The speaker.
All right. Sorry.
No, this has been our day for technical difficulty.
Oh, really? Okay, not just me.
No, we couldn't go live the last.
Oh.
It's been good this year. Last year, I kept not being able to get online and all they could tell me to do was go out and reconnect. Some days I do it 3 times to stay on.
Okay,
We're back also.
thank you for your patience. Maria Royal with Legislative Council, and as the chair mentioned, I'm gonna do a walkthrough of S 129, which pertains to virtual currency kiosks. And as you also alluded to, Madam Chair, there is a provision in H 137, which is the DFR plus, because additional provisions were added. That deals with virtual currency kiosks, and all it does is proposes to extend for 1 additional year the moratorium on new kiosks being licensed in the state. And so
Is that part of the DFR recommendations, or was that added by?
it was not part of DFR's recommendations, and DFR is here today, and you'll hear from DFR. One of the things you asked DFR to do last year when you looked at virtual currency kiosks is to do a report
Right.
on whether additional safeguards or consumer protection enhancements were recommended or necessary, and they did that report. I believe it's posted online, and they came back with a number of recommendations.
Okay.
One of them was not to extend the moratorium, but to enact at least, I think there are about 7 or 9, I don't remember, specific recommendations. So just to give a little bit of background, House Commerce did look at some draft language reflecting those recommendations, as well as proposals put forward by industry. There was not a consensus on that language. And so just in the interest of time, the committee decided to just extend the moratorium.
Okay.
And that's where they left.
We are,
So,
I remember last year, they were a little more cautious than this committee was. There's only 7 of us, so it might be easier for us to reach consensus. But if you have that language drafted, at some point, it was actually.
Sure. Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to do that. So in terms of what is in S 129, so you'll see the first proposed amendment as part of the language you enacted last year. You imposed a daily transaction limit for kiosk transactions, and it was a straight $1,000 per day. So the proposal here is to increase the daily transaction limit 2 different amounts. One that applies to new customers, and that amount would be $2,000 a day. And another, which we'll look at on the second page, which would apply to existing customers, and that would be up to $5,000. So in terms of the definitions, a new customer means an individual who has not completed more than 2 virtual currency transactions with a kiosk operator, or who has completed a second transaction with an operator, but that transaction was completed not more than 72 hours ago, so very recently. If you fall within that time period or you haven't transacted more than 1, you're considered a new customer and you are limited to no more than $2,000 in transactions a day. For all other customers, there's a $5,000 daily transaction limit. And so existing customers would be basically everybody else, individuals, or an individual who has completed at least 2 transactions with an operator, and the second transaction occurred more than 72 hours ago.
I don't know if you know this, and maybe it'll come out in testimony. Do these track with what's allowed with the non-virtual currency banking establishments? Do our banking regulations allow these amounts to be withdrawn from any
Or
traditionally?
is it like an ATM? I don't know what I don't know if it's determined by the bank. I don't know if the state imposes I can check. Let me follow up.
Banks involved, but I don't know if the state.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
I think the ATM is just how much money they can put
Yeah.
in, and if you took it all out, nobody else could use the ATM the rest of the night or the rest of the
I
weekend.
would take 5,000.
I don't
No.
know, there's no, if you deposit I think we're good, but I know if you deposit over, is it 10,000? Happen regularly in real estate, you make a large enough deposit, the FBI does come and talk to you.
There are security,
Yeah.
that will probably come up about what that limit is, because it comes up in this context. So
Some reason
you'll hear
10,000.
more about that.
For the federal one,
Yeah.
it's 10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the other change proposed here is with regard to the fee cap, the fees that can be imposed on a single transaction or a series of related transactions involving virtual currency through one money transmission kiosk. And so under existing law, that fee cap is the greater of $5 or 3% of the US dollar equivalent of currency involved in the transaction. And the proposal here is to increase that amount to 15%. And I believe this is one of the provisions that DFR was okay with. Stated that in their report, but you can confirm that. So the definition of single transaction, the licensing requirement, the operator accountability provisions, there are no changes there. So the moratorium, this is the section that was the deadline, sunset was extended for a year in H137. The proposal here is to end the moratorium, which is set to expire this July, and then include some additional consumer protection provisions. So the first one we're going to read through now is disclosure of material risks. And this would be as part of establishing a relationship with a customer prior to entering into an initial transaction for, on behalf of, or with such customer. I'm just going to say operator instead of saying the whole virtual currency. Yes. Shall disclose in clear, conspicuous, and legible writing in English language, whether in accessible terms, what can be in the terms of service or elsewhere, all material risks associated with its products, services, and activities, and virtual currency generally, including disclosures substantially similar to the following. And there are 10 different disclosures applicable here. The virtual currency is not legal tender, it is not backed by the government, and accounts and value balances are not subject to FDIC or the Securities Investor Protection Corporation protections. legislative and regulatory changes or actions at the state, federal, or international level may adversely affect the use, transport, transfer, exchange, and value of virtual currency. 3, transactions in virtual currency may be irreversible, and accordingly, losses due to fraudulent or accidental transactions may not be recoverable. 4, some virtual currency transactions shall be deemed to be made when recorded on a public ledger, which is not necessarily the date or time that the customer initiates the transaction. 5, the value of virtual currency may be derived from the continued willingness of market participants to exchange fiat currency for virtual currency, which may result in the potential for permanent and total loss of value of a particular virtual currency should the market for that currency disappear. 6, there is no assurance that a person who accepts a virtual currency as payment today will continue to do so in the future. 7, the volatility and unpredictability of the price of virtual currency relative to fiat currency may result in significant loss over a short period of time. 8, the nature of virtual currency may lead to an increased risk of fraud or cyber attack. 9, the nature of virtual currency means that any technological difficulties experienced by the operator may prevent the access or use of a customer's virtual currency. And finally, 10, any bond or trust account maintained by the operator for the benefit of its customers may not be sufficient to cover all losses incurred by customers.
And this is all supposed to be revealed at a kiosk?
Yes, before any initial transaction.
I will say the
So
kiosk is some kind of a little mailbox.
it's like an ATM machine that you would find in a
Okay, well, they
convenience
have a
store, grocery
Screen.
store. There's a
Okay,
screen.
there is a large enough screen,
Yep,
so I can do that.
yep.
All right. We just found out that there's FCC regulations. We just had a presentation on virtual currency exchanges and
Oh, on the state, FTC,
that's right.
Federal Trade Commission, and
No,
the Federal Communications Commission, or SEC. Securities and
Federal-
Exchange Commission.
no, UCC, Uniform.
Oh, okay.
Too many CCs.
Okay, I know there are a lot. I wasn't even close to, I think one time we were like- and the banking world is
The
particularly.
problem is that no one is quite sure what this is.
That's true for a virtual currency. That is an ongoing debate, whether.
How do you regulate it?
Property.
Because
Yeah, and I don't have the expertise to really thoughtfully weigh in. So. In subsection G in existing law was the report requirement that DFR has already done. And that is now replaced with, there are 2 more disclosure requirements. So one was prior to the initial transaction. This one are disclosures that are required upon opening a new account with a customer. And most of that's kind of boilerplate, clear, conspicuous, et cetera. And in substantially similar form to the following. The customer's liability for unauthorized virtual currency transactions. 2, under what circumstances the operator will, absent a court or government order, disclose information concerning the customer's account to third parties. The customer's right to receive periodic account statements and valuations from the operator. 4, the customer's right to receive a receipt, trade ticket, or other evidence of a transaction. 5, the customer's right to prior notice of a change in the operator's rules or policies. And finally, 6, such other disclosures as are customarily given in connection with the opening of customer accounts. And then finally, the last series of disclosures would be made just prior to a transaction taking place. And this is a warning that would presumably come up on the screen for the customer to read. And it would say something to the effect of, did you receive a phone call from your bank, software provider, the police, or were you directed to make a payment for social security, utility bill, investment warrants, or bail money at this kiosk? And if so, stop. Is anyone on the phone pressuring you to make a payment of any kind? Stop. And then I understand that the purchase and sale of cryptocurrency is a final, irreversible, and non-refundable transaction. And I confirm I am sending funds to a wallet I own or directly have control over. And I confirm that I am using funds gained from my own initiative to make my transaction. So that's the final series of disclosures. The next requirement is with respect to blockchain analytics. And there's a specific requirement that the companies, the operators use blockchain analytics, particularly to prevent fraud, to assist in the prevention of sending purchased virtual currency from an operator to a digital wallet known to be affiliated with fraudulent activity at the time of the transaction. And then the commissioner, of course, is Commissioner of Financial Regulation, may request evidence from an operator of current use of blockchain analytics. Customer service, the operator has to have live customer service Monday through Friday between 8 and 10, probably should be Eastern Standard Time. And that is available through a toll-free number, which must be.
Is that for all blockchain companies or just one?
This is for all, at all kiosks. There has to be a toll-free number, so you can call.
Because a kiosk is put up by one specific company,
One
like Bank
operator.
of, okay. I can go to an ATM. I pay a fee to use that ATM to withdraw, or I can go to my bank's ATM and not pay a fee.
Yeah.
These don't work that way right now. I have to go to the company's kiosk
Yeah.
in order to put money into or
That's right.
withdraw.
And there might
Can I
be-
withdraw this money?
Can you withdraw?
I put $1,000
So you have,
in
you bring cash to the kiosk.
and I feed the
Put it in,
cash
it goes
into the
to-
machine.
Yes, the digital wallet.
And well, actually,
Cryptocurrency.
when I'm putting the cash in, I'm putting the cash into like a vending machine.
Yeah, like you would in an ATM,
Okay.
deposit cash.
And well, I suppose this is for the industry, because when I put cash into the bank, I can take it back out. I'm wondering,
Can you take cash? Can you convert the
would
currency
be back
to cash?
cash.
I don't know if you can do that. I would definitely ask
That
the
would be an
industry.
industry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and so one company may own several kiosks throughout the state. So this would apply to each company wherever they operate. Okay, there is a requirement for fraud prevention, requiring the operators to take reasonable steps to detect and prevent fraud, including establishing and maintaining a written anti-fraud policy, which shall include at a minimum the identification and assessment of fraud-related risk areas, procedures and controls to protect against identified risks, allocation of responsibility for monitoring risks, and procedures for the periodic evaluation and revision of the anti-fraud procedures, controls, and monitoring mechanisms. In addition, the company, the operator has to have a due diligence policy, specifically an enhanced due diligence policy, which shall be reviewed and approved by the board of directors or the applicable governing body. And the purpose of the policy is to identify at a minimum individuals who are at risk of fraud based on age or mental capacity. And in addition, compliance policies. There have to be written compliance policies to ensure that the operator is complying with state, federal regulations.
Could you just back that up for a second, Maria, just repeat that again? Just that particular section.
Subsection M,
Yeah,
So-
really it's subsection, L, policy shall identify as the minimum individuals who are at risk. And this is based on a virtual kiosk operator. And I'm wondering, how the heck would they do that?
well, so that's a good question. There are proposals, in the DFR report that talked about you need to go through a live screening with some folks who are elderly, and you would have to do that by prompting them to either show their identification, confirm their date of birth, and then, so however they,
To put on,
Go about
on a
everything.
kiosk as opposed to in a live setting. Because if I were at least understanding this in general, the question is, how do they set up their account? Must they set up their account not on the kiosk, but in some live setting? Are there any specifications? I don't remember seeing any.
not, so if they want to set up their account, not through a kiosk.
No, how can they set up an account through a kiosk? One. And my sense is they can.
Yes,
So the question then becomes, how do you get this identification of mental ability or, for that matter, age? Presumably, and then the question I had asked next is this discriminatory because age is a protected class?
those are excellent questions. And I think that's a part of what they would have to come up with,
And
whatever
I think
policies that
that's
comply.
what the industry and AARP is
Yeah.
also here. I have a feeling they may have some thought on this issue. But that is an excellent question. I'm
Yeah,
standing in your local general store. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Kind of ascertaining.
yes, no, I think those are great questions. So in addition to the compliance policies, there, I think these two employees that are required under this proposal. One is for a compliance officer. So the operator has to designate and employ a compliance officer who meets the following requirements, is qualified to coordinate and monitor compliance with this section and all other applicable federal and state laws and regulations, is employed full-time by the operator, and is not an individual who owns more than 20% of the operator by whom the individual is employed. And then the responsibilities for compliance under federal and state law and regulation shall be completed by one or more full-time employees of the operator. And then finally, an operator needs to designate and employ a consumer protection officer who meets the following requirements, and it's similar to the ones I just went through. Somebody qualified to monitor compliance with state federal laws, employed full-time, and doesn't have a greater than 20% interest in the company. And that is it. The proposals here would take effect on July 1st this year.
Okay. Thank you. We will start hearing from everybody so far. First one is Ethan McLaughlin, is with DFR.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm Ethan McLaughlin. I'm an assistant general counsel with the Department of Financial Regulation. I've worked a lot with our banking division and our securities division, and in particular work a lot on cryptocurrency related regulation and enforcement matters. So last year, the legislature passed, an update to our money transmitter laws, the Money Services Act. That included, several crypto-specific provisions, including some that dealt with cryptocurrency kiosks. Sometimes colloquially called, Bitcoin ATMs or BTMs or something like that, because they look a lot like, an automated teller machine. In that law, the legislature tasked DFR with putting together a report to House Commerce and to Senate Finance. Speaking as to the sufficiency of the existing protections for the cryptocurrency kiosks and making any additional recommendations for additional protections. Any recommendations we had about how to minimize the use of crypto kiosks for illicit purposes. So we submitted that report. I think that's part of one of the documents associated with my testimony. And to the extent you haven't read it, I would encourage you to, because I think it outlines a lot of the issues. I'm going to start by going through some of the stuff in the report, if that would be helpful. Just I think it helps frame the issues. So I guess I'll start with a little background in terms of what crypto kiosks are. Generally speaking, this is sort of standalone, device that's connected to the internet, and provides a way for customers to buy and sell cryptocurrency in person, typically using cash. That's also possible. They might be able to use an ATM card or other methods of payment at the machine. The big, perhaps one of the advantages of this is the ability to put cash into the machine, and then the cryptocurrency can be transferred to a wallet address, a digital currency wallet address that the user provides at the kiosk, and it'll be transferred out instantly. Whereas typically, if you're trying to move money to a cryptocurrency exchange, like an online one of the big ones, you're going to have some clearance times for, an ACH transaction or for a check to clear, or if you're, moving money on by card, there's some clearance times built into it. And those companies aren't going to let you buy cryptocurrency and move it off of their system before the money is cleared, and they know that they're going to get, the payment for that they're expecting. So one of the things that we do in the report at the very beginning is give some background on the issue. And the issue is that virtual currency kiosks have been used extensively by fraudsters and scammers as a preferred vehicle that they want to direct their victims to put the cash in and then be able to transfer. Cash goes in, virtual currency goes out, and they're going to transfer it to some digital wallet address that the scammer has provided them with. And that, virtual currency is getting transferred out, and it's oftentimes going to the other side of the world.
Okay.
Now, if you're trying to send $10,000 to Cambodia, there's some friction in that process, right? You're either going to be mailing it to Cambodia or, going through some, money mule, or if you're trying to send a wire to Cambodia, sending international wires, there are a lot of processing times and verifications involved for, exactly some of these reasons.
I have some time to back out.
Yes. So there's some temporal protections there, and also, some process protections. Oftentimes people on both sides of a bank transaction and their identities have been verified, that sort of thing. Whereas it can be difficult to know whose address, who has control of the virtual currency address to which this is sent.
I'm the only one with this address, but there's no way to verify me that someone else doesn't have a back door into that address and my money goes in. And the next thing anyone knows, it's gone.
Yeah, and then there are different types of, different scams in terms of how they trick people into doing this. But we give some background on the scope of the problems. There's a September 2024 report by the FTC where they're saying there's a tenfold increase in reported fraud losses at crypto kiosks between 2020 and 2023. And the median loss is $10,000. And people over 60 are 3 times more likely to report losses at crypto kiosks. In preparing
I
our,
can't imagine A, having $10,000, but B, getting $10,000 in cash and feeding it into a machine in a parking lot.
and that is exactly what happens. Oftentimes it's a lot more than $10,000. We've seen ones with,
And
substantially
I'm just
more
wondering, why would I
cash.
do that?
Well, the scammers are very sophisticated. This is generally international organized crime. And what they do is they try and induce a sense of false urgency and panic in their victims, where something is terrible is going to happen to that victim imminently unless they act very quickly and do exactly as the scammer tells them. It's all about, this urgency and the sense of panic that overwhelms the victim's, better judgment. Like they think like, why should I really be, isn't it a little weird that I have to go to a Cumberland Farms and with a duffel bag full of cash and like spend an hour
Stand there
feeding
feeding
bills
it,
into it to pay off like a bond from, for a criminal action where I never committed a crime.
It seems like you ought to have an IQ test before you get one of these machines.
But if you read the stories of these victims, and oftentimes they're very, smart people, educated people, and they get overwhelmed because they come in and they have all these ways they establish credibility, and they tell them like, look, your bank account has been compromised. Hackers are in there and they're going to clear it out in the next 30 minutes. And I'm, they're pretending to work for the bank. I'm not supposed to be telling you this, but you need to get your money out right now. And there's a secure way you can move it to. And they're like, well, this sounds a little fishy. It's like, then don't do it. That doesn't cost me anything, it comes out of the
Yeah.
bank's pocket. But if I were you, I would do this because they're coming right now.
I had a parking I had going through a toll bill,
Mhm.
and I had to contact them right away, or my car was going to be impounded. They were trying to sell me a digital health monitoring watch. Last week I had a text that popped up that said somebody was charging $950 to my PayPal account in Penny's or someplace in a drugstore. And I had to contact this email right away to stop that sale. Of course, it was to Joe something. It was a very strange email, but I could have just clicked on it and I'll bet you they would have wanted my PayPal password.
Yeah.
And you can see where get focused and you don't
Right.
think ahead.
Like I said, they have very sophisticated ways of inducing this panic and creating trust. So they'll be on the line with the person and they'll like get another call and it's like, oh, that's,
I had
and
a guy,
it'll be Microsoft, right? So I'm trying to be Microsoft and they'll be telling them about this hack that happened. It'll establish this credibility because they're hearing about it from a different source, or they, or someone pretending to be the sheriff's office will contact their parents. And their parents will say the sheriffs are asking about you, what's going on. And they think, oh, maybe there actually is a warrant out for my arrest and I need to pay this bail or something. So it's very sophisticated.
yeah,
Do you have any statistics regarding the extent of fraud or fraudulent attempts?
I do have a little. There's some in the report. I'd say, as part of this process, we asked we solicited comment letters and we got 13, including one from, the Attorney General, Charity Clark. And one of the things that she reported were, and this was in October, said they'd received 45 reports of crypto-related fraud in the last 3 years. And 14, or about a third of those reports, and he said not all of the reports, told them about the means of transmission, but in at least 14 of the reports, about a third of them, virtual currency kiosks were being used to facilitate the scam. And something that anyone in consumer protection or law enforcement will tell you is that the vast overwhelming majority of these frauds and scams are not reported. The victims are embarrassed and they think the money's gone and there's nothing that can come out of it. There was also in February, so after the date of our report, the Iowa Attorney General filed civil lawsuits against 2 large crypto ATM companies. And I'm certain those companies would vigorously and will vigorously contest a lot of the allegations in those suits. I don't want to, this isn't the forum to litigate the allegations, but the interesting thing was that they detailed the investigation that they had done before bringing the suit. And that was really interesting because it's stuff that we've heard anecdotally, but they were doing a little bit more methodically. And what they said is that they reviewed the transaction records for these. They subpoenaed a bunch of transaction records for the companies. They performed blockchain analytics on a bunch of the transactions to see where the crypto went. And the really significant thing is that they contacted hundreds of scam victims that the company had sort of self-identified as scam victims, but also hundreds of ordinary kiosk users and conducted interviews with them. Now, I don't think that they spoke with every kiosk user. I think there were thousands of kiosk users. I think so far they've spoken with hundreds of them. And I don't know, I suspect they were probably prioritizing ones that might have had certain, indicia of fraud. I don't know that exactly how they conduct the investigation, but they've said publicly in this report that, that for both of these companies, over 90% of the hundreds of customers that they've talked to reported that they were victims of a scam. And for one of the companies, they talked to each of the top 20 customers by dollar volume. 100% of those top 20, the transactions occurred because of a scam, and that represented $7.3 million of transaction, which is those 20 customers. And most users and victims of fraud they're able to verify were over the age of 60 for these ATMs.
2 questions. One, I see in the report, the Attorney General Charity Clark, I believe, says that she does not recommend suspending moratorium. I'm wondering if that's changed since that October. The second question is, these transactions, could they be done in a traditional human teller? Do banks right now allow for people to come in and buy and transact virtual currency at these amounts? And if not, why do we want to try to enable this in this detached ATM type kiosk? What problem are we trying to solve? But that's probably a question that you're not going to.
So right now, to my knowledge, there are no banks where you could buy crypto in cash. Banking regulations are changing at the federal level in a lot of ways that will make it much easier for banks to offer those services. Under sort of your prior federal administration, the banking regulators would not have looked well upon those. And I'm not aware of any bank in Vermont that has any plans to offer that service.
And then I know when we had a whole rash of lottery scams, one right down to, where sending balloons to the house, and it was going to be on TV, and this was where, you had to send us $200 to cover the cost of processing your $20,000 and $2 million in winning. And I know there was some talk with the our banks talking to the Canadian banks, because this was coming out of Montreal. And the black market there, and I haven't heard the complaint since, but basically, you know, you need to monitor what's going on, and if your folks are sending out checks to the United States that they don't have the funds to cover. And so I think this seems to be the newest. We train people. I was behind someone in Walmart who was buying $300 gift cards. And the clerk tried to talk her out of it, and she would not be talked out. And they said, you know, there's a police officer out in the foyer. Why don't we go out and you can talk to him? But we haven't. So this is a freestanding, so there's no other human there to say to you, you might want to think twice about this.
You know, I will say oftentimes the victims are taking the money out of their bank and they are having some interaction with the teller. And then there are several comment letters from Vermont banks. People at Vermont banks are talking about this being such a huge problem. I think one says that, you know, to their knowledge, no one who's taken out money to bring it. They're not aware of anyone having done this in connection with a legitimate transaction. But,
Yeah.
you know, the scammers are giving them a script to tell to the teller and walking them through that. You know, say you're buying a car or you're doing, yeah.
That was when I won the lottery. I could keep them on the phone, and I could go down to Walgreens and buy a one-time gift card, and I could keep them on the phone. They would walk with me on the phone. And I told them I was a senator. I knew this was a fraud. And the minute I hung up, I was calling the police. I wouldn't give up.
Yeah.
I just decided I'd see how far they go. But it was right. Yeah, we will stay with you. Just keep us right here on the phone.
So what I do want to circle back to was your question about whether the Attorney General's office was still recommending extending the moratorium. I'm not aware of them changing their position on that. A position that has changed since our report is DFR's. We now recommend extending the moratorium for at least another year for reasons that I'm happy to get into more detail about, but it has to do with some of the allegations in this complaint, legislative efforts that are happening in many other states where I think, you know, best practices are being established, and just the desire to have, you know, that this can be a dangerous product, and we're trying to put in protections, and we propose a bunch of protections in our report. We believe that, you know, our hope is that those would be effective, but we're not positive that they'll be effective. And I think in more time, we'll have more data as more jurisdictions impose these protections, and we'll be able to see, hopefully, you know, if they're working the way we all hope and intend.
Because this has been presented as the new thing that young tech savvy people want to do. So it's interesting to see how it's getting transferred down to seniors, and that there's a victimization being set up there.
And just to be 100% clear, our goal on this is not to impede the ability of Vermonters to invest in cryptocurrency if that's what they want to do with their money. There've never been more ways to do that in Vermont. The ways we can do that are safer than they have been previously, especially when the full protections of the bill we passed last year go into effect in July. But you can, you know, there are licensed online exchanges where you can buy crypto. You know, fees are generally significantly lower. So they don't have quite the same overhead. You can, you know, buy ETFs through your brokerage account, and invest in crypto, you know, they are, under the full regulatory framework of the securities laws. So there are many ways there are many Vermonters who invest in cryptocurrency, who want to invest in cryptocurrency. Our goal is, we don't think that this will, impede their access, or impede the ability to buy cryptocurrency with cash. But we think that the downsides that come with that sort of outweigh the convenience of it. But that's, of course, a policy decision for for the legislature and for the governor to decide if, if they think that there's a, public benefit allowing, these in the state that outweighs the downside, if that can be sufficiently mitigated with other protections. But for right now, we are recommending extending the moratorium for another year. With that said, we've had extensive conversations with industry, with AARP and consumer protection advocates around like a set of additional protections that our hope would be effective. Say we're in general agreement on 98% of those, maybe. There are two main points of contention right now, which are, relate to the daily transaction limit and the size of that, as well as, the whether a moratorium would be in place. But, DFR, we're not, if you want to go through this exercise, we're not opposed to putting in those additional protections that we've been talking with industry and consumer protection advocates about. But our proposal right now is that those would apply to the 3 machines that are currently operating, and we wouldn't allow new machines into the state until we had the full confidence that these new protections were as effective as we hope that they will be.
So you can try them on the machines that are here now
Yes.
and see if they work. Okay.
Yes, but if you don't want to go through that exercise, and you'd rather just extend the moratorium under the existing protections, we do think there are only 3 machines operating right now, legally operating under the moratorium, and sort of outlined in our report, we think that's been singularly effective at reducing the amount of fraud, just simply by limiting the access in the transaction limits. But if we were going to extend it out more, then we do think that there's more you can do, and we're relying on this $1,000 daily transaction limit as the primary vehicle to sort of slow down fraud. Sort of detail in the report, there are a couple issues with that. One is that most frauds, most scams are for less than $1,000, right? People who think they're, the whole scam or, any number of others. And if you look at the FTC data about fraud, the median fraud report is under $1,000. So our daily transaction limit does not help with that. But it's also the case that with these crypto fronts, you get huge losses, right? Where you get people just bringing tens of thousands of dollars. And as we said in the FTC report, $10,000 median loss, right? It's meaning half of the losses are more than $10,000. And so as part of the documents for my testimony, I uploaded those, I provided the complaints from the petitions from those Iowa lawsuits. And I said, I'm not presenting anything that's alleged in there as fact that's going to be litigated in a court of law, and I don't want to turn this into, but there are anecdotes of individual victims, a lot of them sprinkled throughout there, where it sort of talks about, people bringing the, money over, the course of months, and just some really huge dollar amounts. As I said, they had 20 victims that fed $7.3 million of cash into these machines. Just 20 people.
Surprised the machines aren't being stolen.
Is that just in Vermont?
That was not right. That was in Iowa.
Okay.
So in Vermont, we have not had that scale growth, but
But we don't.
Iowa's not California or New York's, New York, it's a relatively small rural state that's not that dissimilar to Vermont, but it is larger.
Yeah.
So, and again, I just think that there's some anecdotes there that were powerful to us. I said, we're not accepting them as fact, but part of the reason, that'll be decided in a court of law. That's part of why we're supporting that, extending the moratorium. It's like, let's see how this stuff plays out.
Where there's
Let's
smoke,
see if-
there just might be fire.
Right, and there's a lot of stuff that we've heard anecdotally from law enforcement and seen in our own review of records, but I think there are a lot of regulators, federally, state law enforcement looking at this issue, and I suspect we'll have even more data and information a year from now.
Okay.
Are there any states that have looked at the kiosk proposals and have rejected them universally and not allowed them in the state?
So far, no one has done that yet,
And how many states have done it?
but have banned them.
No, how many states have allowed them?
I think they're in most states, but weren't necessarily regulated in most states. There are a lot of bills pending right now, in various stages and various legislators. New Jersey, there is a bill that's proposed that would ban them outright. I haven't been following that. I don't know how likely that is to pass. I think if it did pass, that'd probably give permission to a lot of other states to do the same thing. There are a lot of cities that have looked at it, at the municipal level, putting into place, bans within city limits. I don't know if those have passed yet, but I know those have been, proposed and are under discussion in a lot of places. Those efforts are often led by, coming at the behest of law enforcement.
This is something new. I remember being told a couple of years ago, we weren't sure if it got regulated under banking or securities or something else. I don't think any governmental body wants to stand in the way of progress or but we also know that in times where there's change and there aren't an overriding curtain of law and regulation that's out there, UCC is just starting, as we just learned. They have put out some regulations, not of kiosks, just online.
Right, in terms of how things will be treated and how you take a security interest in it if you're lending against it. So
And so we're at the beginning, and I think we're trying to figure out how to move forward at the same time, make sure that people don't get victimized. And the fraudsters are always faster than we are, but we keep trying. Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
So I guess one last thing that, and this will, come up, but just to be crystal clear, so the S-129, the bill that Maria walked you through, that does not have implement our recommendations from the report, or, reflect the ongoing discussions that we've had with different folks. One of the versions of H-137, not the version that passed, was closer, but not quite there on several points. So I just want to make sure that is clear.
And I think I've been clear, I put this in so that industry got to put out their proposal. Maybe industry and DFR can come closer to an agreement if things are out there. I have no intention of pushing DFR. my job is to protect the people of Vermont, not the industry, but if we can do both, that's always ideal.
That was my question. So I want to know if there was language that with our 3 existing kiosks operating, I definitely support extending the moratorium. Do you see anything language that you do support that's floating out there that we should be considering to protect Vermonters in these?
Yes, I'd say we're very close on a number of points that we would, support for those 3. And I can walk you through, what those provisions are, if you'd like me to.
We're running on a tight time frame. I have a chairs meeting unless they've canceled it at 4:30. And this is just our initial walkthrough. We're going to be doing
Completely fine.
the FR bill. And we will have lots of time to talk, and I think we will also make sure, that everybody has time to negotiate.
Okay.
Thank you.
On that case, I'll let you hear from others.
Okay, well, next we have Larry Lipka. Larry, just tell us who you are, who you represent. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Larry Lipka. I'm the General Counsel of Netflix. We're one of the largest crypto kiosk companies in the world. We operate a network of over 6,000 kiosks across 10 countries, including 2 kiosks in Vermont, at Central Beverage in Essex Junction and Lipton Mart store in Attleboro. We used to have 3, but we removed one of the kiosks, so we only have 2 right now, and obviously can't replace them others on moratorium. So our customers prefer using our kiosks because it's the only way to use cash to buy crypto. The way that people would buy crypto with cash before there were kiosks was basically finding someone online who wanted to sell crypto and then meet them at a parking lot and exchange cash for crypto, which obviously is not ideal because there's no know your customer, no OFAC sanctions checks, and it's also dangerous for the person trying to buy the crypto because they can get robbed. So this was the solution to that problem. We all share the goal of protecting consumers from bad actors seeking to depart people from their hard-earned money. And that's why I'm here today advocating for stricter regulation of the crypto kiosk industry. CoinFlip wants every actor in the space to utilize the same protections that we do to keep consumers safe. And we know what we're doing is effective in protecting consumers because of analysis done by a third-party blockchain analytics company called Elliptic. So I'll talk a little bit about what blockchain is and blockchain analytics. You heard that's in the bill, one of the requirements. So in simple terms, a blockchain is a decentralized ledger of all transactions across a peer-to-peer network. So using this technology, participants can confirm transactions without the need for a central clearing authority like a bank. It's like a public, unchangeable spreadsheet that's impossible to hack or change. And then blockchain analytics is like being a detective for the digital world, examining the data on the blockchain, like the Bitcoin blockchain, where all the transactions are displayed publicly, to understand how people are using it, what transactions are happening, and potentially identify suspicious activities like fraud and money laundering. So Elliptic's a product, and Elliptic is used by the CIA, FBI, federal government, law enforcement everywhere. We use them for blockchain analytics. They have a newer product called Discovery, and it's a tool to conduct due diligence on crypto companies. So what they do is they analyze all the data available on the blockchain, which is public well-known, like I said, and create a risk score. So CoinFlip, the company I work for, our risk score is on par with that of Coinbase and other major exchanges, meaning we do just as good or a better job as us in the exchanges at preventing fraud and other illicit transactions. Unfortunately, not all of the crypto kiosk companies are as good at preventing fraud as we are. I worked at the AG's office in Illinois. Our chief compliance and chief legal officer was a federal prosecutor for 10 years, worked at Morgan Stanley in the fraud department. So we know how to protect consumers, and that's why we're advocating for what I'll go through later, all these protections. So we know how to keep consumers safe. We want everyone else in the state to do the same thing. And I think a very good example of that is when the moratorium went into place, the only operator that stayed was us. And part of that was because there's a 3% fee cap imposed and no one can operate on that. We're operating at a loss for every transaction, but we're here to engage with the state and try to get something passed that works for industry and consumer protection advocates. In that time, we received one report of somebody scams at our kiosk for that entire period, and we refunded that person the whole amount. So, people slip through the cracks all the time. You cannot prevent 100% of fraud. There is no way to do that. But, you will now be preventing fraud by banning a kiosk because it will just go somewhere else, like gift cards, like you've talked about, or peer-to-peer transactions or Zelle. And, no one's advocating for banning cell phones because someone gets a text message from a scammer or gets a call from them. No one's advocating banning Facebook because a Roman scammer uses Facebook to pretend.
We are banning them in schools.
Well, I agree with that, yes, but not banning for everybody, right? And no one's saying ban banks, right? We've talked about today that this is our kiosk only can use cash. Where do people get cash? They get it from their bank. There are already federal laws in place that you have to talk to your customers, understand their transaction history. So if someone who's elderly takes out $50 a month for the last 5 years, all of a sudden they want to take out $10,000, the bank should be asking the questions. And the bank has a way to stop someone from transacting. So if someone goes and says, I have to pay bail for my granddaughter at the bank should be stopping that. And we're not advocating for banning banks because people use cash to get scammed. So I just wanted to sort of make that point. And, Vermont has been a leader in regulating our industry for many years. It was one of the first states that required us to be registered as a money transmitter license. And many states say that crypto is not money, so we don't regulate you. We are advocating for every state to regulate us as money transmitter licensees because that's the first line of defense against the bad operators. The Department of Financial Regulation had to approve our application, looks at our compliance policies and procedures, and can audit us and ask us for all of our transaction history. So, we mentioned the Iowa suit. If DFR wants to look at all of our transactions, they can just ask us as part of our examination, and we can disprove those allegations in that lawsuit, which frankly is political and false, and we're going to vigorously defend against it. And I would just like to say that one point that was made was that the Iowa AG had investigated our company completely before filing the suit. That's just not true. We received a subpoena, we were in the middle of complying with it, and we were blindsided by a lawsuit which has factual inaccuracies in it that we were about to clear up when we responded to the next round of the subpoena documents. So we were a little upset that we're working with the AG's office and trying to protect consumers, and we get sued. And just noting that it was rushed to be filed the week before Slam Scandal Week, and now the Iowa AG has done a lot of press conferences about it. So that's all I can talk about. That it's obviously pending litigation. I can't get into facts, but it's false, and we're going to vigorously defend against that. So Vermont has been a leader. MTL requirement, great. And each kiosk has to get a decal. You have to get that approved by DFR. So even if this moratorium is lifted, DFR has to approve each location. And that process for PointFlip years ago took over a year. So DFR could do the same thing for any new operator, not approve them for over a year, and then you can keep the bad actors out. So we don't need a moratorium. There's already a regulatory framework in place to prevent bad actors from operating in the state. And one other thing that, I'd like to know that a lot of the statistics about fraud, it's about crypto in general, not just kiosks. And there was recently a report from another blockchain analytics company that says that, bank transfers are the most fraud comes from bank transfers. It's not crypto. So it's a problem that everyone in the United States right now, and we have to come together to figure out how to solve it. So, because of reports of consumers being scammed by bad actors and others, let me move on. I think for time here. So, I required DFR issue this report on crypto kiosks that contained a number of recommendations. And I met with DFR in person and while testifying here at the Capitol and on video calls. And during this engagement, PointFlip has agreed to every consumer protection recommended. So everything in that report we will agree to do, except for one thing that I'll discuss, and that's the transaction limits. So we're willing to put that in a bill that everyone has to do these things. And frankly, it's what we already do as a company. And I think we do a good job of fraud even by only having one staff victim. So, we already have a red line with that bill as well that has all those in there to help speed this up that I can share it with Ethan. So just to go through quickly what those recommendations are we've agreed to is digital and paper receipts. Our machines don't have printers, but we'll add them. Taking ID for all customers at their first dollar of their transaction. We will be the only financial services company in the country that takes ID at $1. And what that does is that prevents fraud because the person in front of the machine is the person that's transacting because you do biometrics to verify the ID is real and the person matches the ID. We'll take email for all customers as recommended, recorded phone calls with customers over 60 before their first transaction to make sure that they're not being scammed by asking them questions. Transaction monitoring policies. We've agreed to do a phone call with a customer before they've done their first $5,000 in the 10-day period to make sure that they know what they're doing. So those two things, two calls will prevent people from getting scammed out of tens of thousands of dollars because we're talking to them on the phone. Live customer service, we would say have it for 24 hours a day like we do already, or at least while the kiosks are operational. We take a photo of every customer at the kiosk. That should be mandated for everybody. Wallet pinning, so that only one customer can use one wallet. That also prevents fraud. The use of blockchain analytics to stop scammers, a fee cap of 15%, fee disclosures, and then a new customer period of 30 days so that, DFR recommended 7, AARP wants 30. So we've agreed to increase it to 30 days. So for 30 days, a customer can only buy a certain amount of crypto. We're advocating for 2,000 during that period, like in Senator Cummings' bill. And then most importantly, we've agreed to a refund provision. So for customers in that new user period, that first 30 days, if they are defrauded, all they have to do is contact the police or federal government or some other government actor, say they've been defrauded, contact us. We are required to refund them. So there is literally no chance for a Vermonter to lose any money during the first 30 days of transactions because we are agreeing to refund them. So I get that crypto kiosks can be used by bad actors and that some companies are not as good as CoinFlip at preventing that. But what this refund period does is protect the most vulnerable customers. Those are the new customers who may not be familiar with crypto, maybe even that random phone call from someone. They get a refund. And then for customers outside of that 30-day period, we will refund them the fees because we don't want to profit off the scam victims. So the only area we disagree on, and I think it's the only area we disagree with AARP as well, is the amount of crypto someone can buy. We're advocating for 2,000 a day for new users, 5,000 for existing users. And this complies with what other states have done. So Connecticut passed a bill last year. It's 2,000 and 5,000. It's 7 days for a new user. This is 30 days. Rhode Island's about to pass a bill, which is AARP backed, which is 2,000 and 5,000. It's the same 30-day period. And there are a lot of other states that are passing similar bills or they're about to be passed this year. And they range from, they're all $2,000 a day for new users, except in California. And then they range from like 5,000 to 10,500. Maryland is going to be 2,000 and 10,500 for new users. So if Vermont were to pass this 2,000, 5,000 range, it's at the conservative end of these daily transactions. And, it's just unclear to me why DFR is proposing a moratorium when we've already done the report. We already have recommendations on how to protect consumers. So why would we put that into legislation? And then if a company can't comply with it, then they can't be in the state and we're protecting consumers. And, while with good intention, the $1,000 day limit has unintended consequences because it does not account for federal reporting requirements, including the $2,000 suspicious activity reporting or SAR threshold. When transactions are limited to 1,000, the federal government and thus law enforcement receive less information, which makes it difficult for them to investigate and stop bad actors. And I think there was a question about the CTR, currency transaction report threshold, and that's 10,001. If someone buys more than $10,000 of a financial services product in one day, you have to submit a currency transaction report. And that's why Maryland did it at 10,500 to make sure that the federal government would get those reports. And there's also the funds transfer rule at 3,000, you have to take social security number. So if you limit it to 1,000, then someone does a $1,000 transaction, you don't submit a SAR to the federal government, and then that bad actor can just defraud somebody else. So, like I said, we will support those reasonable limits, 2,000, 5,000. And, we want customers to be able to use crypto and buy it with cash. And there's a question about, can you sell crypto at kiosks? Not all of them, but there are some in, we've got one in New Hampshire where you can, or in Maryland where you can sell crypto. So most of our customers are just buying crypto. They're not need to sell. So we don't have as many of the two-way machines. Some of our competitors just have the buy machines. And there are also some in New Hampshire, a competitor where you can sell crypto. And I just want to make an important point that, Vermonters, if the kiosks are not here, can still buy large amounts of crypto from digital companies that will not be required to utilize all of the consumer protections we are promoting, thus putting them at risk. So if someone at Coinbase is not required to get all of these disclosures or have a phone call or the use of blockchain analytics, none of that is legally mandated. So you'll just be pushing Vermonters to digital platforms that have no effect on the economy of Vermont. We pay local hosts money every month to host these machines. And then those digital platforms don't have the same protections that will be required by this bill, most importantly, that refund provision. So if someone is defrauded at an exchange, you could buy millions of dollars and there may be a couple-day waiting period, but the scammer just keeps the person in that fear until the transaction goes through, and then hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars is lost immediately. You can look at the New York Times. This is happening all over the place. So the kiosk is a safe way to buy limited amounts of cryptocurrency with all of these protections in place. So I talked a little bit about the states that already passed things. One thing I want to know is California passed $1,000 daily limit. They were the first state to pass available. We're active there and trying to get it to at least 2,000. And they don't have any of these consumer protections like a refund provision. So consumers are not protected there from scams because they do not get a refund. But in Vermont, you would, get that refund. So, we're willing to work with DFR, with ARP. We've agreed on literally everything except for the daily transaction limit and of course the moratorium. So if there are any suggestions from anybody on this committee or any consumer advocate, let's put it in the bill and let's make this the premier consumer protection bill in the country. And this would be the premier consumer protection bill if we did all of DFR's recommendations, not just for crypto, not just for crypto kiosks, but for any single financial services company. Because right now, no financial services company has to refund scam victims. It just doesn't happen. So thank you. I appreciate your time and I'm really happy to answer any questions.
It sounds like you are very close to DFR. So
Yes.
my advice would be to go forth and continue to negotiate.
Yeah, happy to. So the only thing left is the daily limit. And
Yeah,
of course, the moratorium for us is a non-starter because we only have 2 kiosks. We have basically more, we have a money treatment license. DFR has to approve the location. So those are all in the areas of contention. I just want to have there.
any questions, committee?
Would you say you said your cap fee was 15%? Is that, who receives that fee?
So we receive the fee. That's how we make our money as transaction fees.
Kiosk
Yeah,
operator.
yes.
Okay.
And sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I'm just curious for that.
Yeah, and there were some questions that were asked, and I can probably just go through very quickly just to answer them. So, so the customer services would just be for the requirements just for crypto kiosk operators. It's not for all crypto companies, but, I would advocate that it should be for all crypto companies to have a customer service number. The disclosures, it's centered on companies that sometimes too many is bad because then people don't read them. I think that we're balancing that.
It's
here
like
in this.
privacy policy.
Right, exactly. So I think that the DFR has done a good job of balancing that, of not having too many, but hitting the main points. And I think you asked a question about, how do you set up an account? How do you identify people? I went through that a little bit. We do that right at the kiosk. So somebody can go to the kiosk, there's a camera, you take a picture of them, and then they are sent to a mobile application where they do biometrics through a company called Persona, where they take a picture of the ID and then they have to move their face back and forth to identify them. And we're doing that at $1. So, no one is going to use this product if they're a criminal because you have to give your ID at your first dollar of transaction. So, money launderers, criminals will not be using this product. They'll move on to something else.
And Senator Matos, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious about the fee, that 15% fee. What goes into that as to why it's up to 15% versus, like a credit card fee or whatever at 3%?
Sure. So, Coinbase charges 3% if you want to buy crypto with a credit card. And there's no overhead for Coinbase on that. Whereas we have to pay for the kiosks, which are like $15,000. We have to pay local hosts. We pay them about $500 a month to put the machine into their store. And we have to buy crypto from someone. So Coinbase is an exchange where they're matching up a buyer and seller on their platform. So they don't have to buy the crypto from somebody else. Whereas we have, when you're buying gold, you have to pay a premium for that gold, and then you have to pass that fee on to your customer. So there's that fact that we have to buy the crypto at a premium from liquidity providers, and then we have to pay the cash in transit, the armed guards, and that's very expensive, especially in Vermont, because we only have 2 kiosks, so there's not an efficiency of scale where the truck can pick up like 10 machines on the same day. So that's a very expensive process. And the closest in traditional finance to our product is the currency exchange booth at the airport, where you're transferring pesos for dollars. It's sort of a similar product, except ours is dollars for crypto, and they charge between 20 and 30%. So 15% is significantly below that, and it's frankly lower than what some operators are charging in other states. And there's been no state that's passed a fee cap lower than 15%. Every state that's done it has done 15%, 18%, or Minnesota has done a fee disclosure. So that, the market will figure that out. So if someone knows what they're paying, they'll go to the lower cost operator.
So there's a lot that goes into just being able to put cash in an ATM and get crypto.
Yeah, and hopefully Vermont, there would be refunds too. We'd have to, pay for that and compliance officer, all that stuff. So it's an expensive thing, but people want to use cash. Like in Vermont, you're protecting people's ability to use cash in stores or restaurants. And this is a way to protect people's, that same demographic, their ability to buy crypto with cash.
Linda Hardy.
You mentioned that you're collecting quite a bit of biometric data. What are you doing with that? We have been having a lengthy conversation in this building about data privacy.
Sure.
So how do you protect that? And do you sell it? What do you do with it?
So we never get the biometric data. It's the third party persona that gets the biometric data, and it's we have to keep it under the Data Secrecy Act because you have to keep all the KYC information that you've done, but we never have access to it. And since we don't have access to it, we can't sell it. And our company has a biometric policy, and we have, all the warnings and disclosures so that customers know what they're doing and how we treat their data, including their biometric data.
So the company that you contract with that collect that data, what are they doing with the data? Right?
So they tell us, and this is not my area of expertise. I believe that they delete it within like 24 hours because it's just about identity verification. So they don't keep the biometric markers. They do keep the photos of the individual because that goes into the case file. So that's part of the customer profile is the photos that they've taken. But the biometric indicators that are used are deleted within a certain month. So that's contractual. I just don't have the length of time.
Senator Brock.
Quick one. You said there were 3 kiosks, but then one of them you closed. Why did you close one of your kiosks?
Yeah, I don't know. It happens for various reasons. The store gets sold, or they just don't want the kiosk anymore. Usually, it's when like a store gets closed. But I don't know the reason for this one. Unfortunately, I can find out and let you know.
I do have another question. And that is in terms of the value assigned when something is purchased. Where do you get the value?
So we use the market rate that Coinbase advertises.
So it's a Coinbase advertising.
Yeah.
Does everyone universally accept that as a rate? Is that considered a standard, or is that simply their rate?
So that is Coinbase's rate, which in the United States, the big exchanges basically set the market rate for cryptocurrencies. And there are some states like California mandates that we set our fee based on the market rate that an SEC approved exchange in the United States uses. So there's only a few of them. So we use Coinbase's. And then there were just other questions about, how many states have allowed these kiosks? It's all the states except for New York right now. We're in the process of getting a bid license. There have been no states that have banned the kiosks. New Jersey, there was one senator that proposed a ban, and frankly, it's not going anywhere because we're very active there and nobody wants to ban a product. We're pushing for regulation, and there are no cities that have products. We have talked to the cities that, there were some in Minnesota that were talking about a ban, but that's because they didn't realize that the state of Minnesota had already passed a bill that requires refunds for new users. So they were satisfied that that would protect consumers.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Any other questions? Please just reach out.
ARP.
Thank you, Chair. Colin Hilliard, I'm the Advocacy Director at ARP Vermont. ARP is a nonpartisan social mission organization with 50+ membership, 38 million nationwide, and 110,000 here in Vermont. And our concern with S129 and generally crypto kiosks is around the risk of fraud of these machines. And so just to give you just one piece of kind of micro data or macro data on the cryptocurrency kiosk specifically, that there is also a lot of data out there around crypto in general, but specifically in crypto kiosks and fraud. The FBI's Internet Crime Compliance Center, of the more than 5,500 complaints involving cryptocurrency kiosks reported to the agency in 2023, that's the latest available data. Almost half came from people over 60. And of the roughly 189 million of losses involved in these complaints, 124 belong to those over 60. So this is something that, especially losses, are quite high for older folks. That's in part because they have the life savings built up to lose. But it's also important to note that, fraud is something that can happen to anyone, and it does. As far as just kind of, what fraud as it relates to cryptocurrency kiosks, what it looks like. I know that there was kind of a question of, do people really take tens of thousands of dollars and put them into a machine? And in unregulated states that can and does happen. In the memo that letter that we put in on towards the end there, you'll find ARP has a fraud watch network in partnership with the Attorney General's office in Colorado. It's a 1-800 number that folks can call in. And there's dozens of examples there of real calls from real folks that have called in to that line and laying out how these scams work. There's business imposter scams. Someone that thought that they were paying Netflix got deep into a scam over a long period of time, ended up losing $250,000. There's government imposter scams involving the IRS. And there's tech imposter scams, which are, I believe, the latest Attorney General's report here in Vermont, are particularly prevalent here. Just to review one, Stephanie, a 73-year-old woman, was struggling with a computer issue and Googled Geek Squad. Unfortunately, she reached a Geek Squad imposter. The scammer berated her and threatened her continuously through the course of the scam to the point that she was afraid to report it to anyone until she reported it to the Fraud Watch network. So these are often underreported. Folks are scared, they're embarrassed. Maybe they borrow money from a loved one and are scared to acknowledge the fact that that's what this money has gone to. That's where our concern with this issue is. And so as written, we have some serious concerns with S129. We understand, this is the starting place for you all. This would, as written, just to really make clear, would increase the daily transaction limits, which is something that we're not in favor of. We'd like to keep those at 1,000, which is probably the biggest point of disagreement. Also, it would not include refund provisions. We think that's a really important part to have. But as you've heard from the two previous folks, there has been an ongoing discussion here. I do agree that we are close on many things. The new customer period being 30 days, the refund periods and refunds of the new customer and a refund of fees for existing customers. We think that those are all important things that need to be included if and when you do decide to dive into the regulation of this.
You might not know this, Colin, but is the current limit $1,000 a day in Vermont?
The current limit is $1,000. And also, I just want to mention something too, and that I've heard discussed around the suspicious activity reports, and that being at $1,000 wouldn't require you would miss out on having those. That those suspicious activity reports are in aggregate. So I would encourage you to hear from DFR, the AG's office, or more folks on exactly how those work, and if the $1,000 limit, with transactions in aggregate, you would still have those being filed.
Okay. Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We want to continue to work, but I hope you continue to work. Sounds like we're close. Not such significant in front of DFR. So I wish you well. And that is it for today's committee. Some of us have shared